Hello, everybody. Good afternoon. Welcome to the Accessibility Manual Testing live stream. We're having a really beautiful July, I have to say, here in Los Angeles. It has not been oppressively hot like it normally is. It's actually been quite lovely, and even getting a little chilly once the sun goes down, so that you need a sweater. Just beautiful, perfect, like Los Angeles weather today. Blue sky, sunshine, warm, but not hot. Uh, Pretty nice day. I hope it's beautiful wherever you are too. So we're going to pick up where we left off last time and continue on with manual testing. So just in case you missed the last session, I want to talk about, just take a couple of minutes to talk about kind of where we are and what we're doing. So we're using the easy checks from the Web Accessibility Initiative to go through the page, to go through web pages and test them out. And these are they're not comprehensive, right? Like you could go through and do all of these checks, and that is not checking every single WCAG success criteria. It is not a comprehensive audit of the page where we would expect for it to find every possible issue on the page. However, the easy checks can be done by anyone with just free tools. So you don't need any, you don't need to buy any special tools. You don't need to install anything on your computer besides a browser, which hopefully you already have. And they're meant to be so that anybody could do them. So anybody can come along, even if you have no prior experience doing accessibility testing, and work your way through these easy checks. So we are in a little bit of an odd state with the easy checks documentation from WAI. You can see that the document I have up on the screen right now is marked as a draft. So this is the updated replacement document, and it is only a draft. And we have the old document, which is not a draft any longer. However, this document is quite old. There are some, there's no, I don't think, maybe at the very bottom. Okay, so it says the last time this page was updated was in August of 2023, but I suspect that was a relatively minor update, because I see several things on this page that make me think it's at least 10 years old. So it's a little bit out of date, and this is still in draft and not quite ready to be used, but we're gonna work our way through this. So in the last call, we worked through image alt text, page title, heading structure, and color contrast. We talked about some other things as well, so we didn't spend the whole hour on just those 4 tests. But if you're interested in kind of seeing how I step through those tests, you could definitely go back to the video from 2 weeks ago. I think it was actually 13 days ago, because I tried out doing a Thursday live stream last time, where I normally do a Wednesday afternoon. But you can find that on LinkedIn or on YouTube if you're interested in seeing those. So we're going to pick up today. We're going to pick up that skip link, and we're going to continue our way down. And I have a few pages that I might switch between for the testing. So the first is this website here called Discover Venus. And this is a pretend travel website, because as much as you might like to, I have to break it to you that you cannot actually travel to Venus. So this site has been around for a while. I hand created this site purposefully to have a site to test accessibility issues on. A few years ago, it was based on a free PSD template that was actually for a site to travel to Greece. There's the credits in the footer. Unfortunately, the link to where I got the PSD is now broken. It's no longer online, but Anyway, that's where this site came from. So the layout and design came from that PSD, and then the content was a variety of research about the planet Venus, and then just making some things up, because obviously we can't actually go to Venus, and even if we could, it doesn't actually look like that picture there. The other site that we have is Discover Mercury, so same thing, except this site has a different origin story. So this site was actually generated by AI. So I went to a site generator AI and gave it a prompt to build me a travel site for trips to the planet Mercury. And it didn't even question me. It just said okay, and made up this whole site. And this version of that site has had um, only a few minor changes to it from what the AI generated. So the AI basically stole images, like hot linked images, off of other people's servers in a couple of cases. And in another couple of cases, it appears to have just hallucinated the URL to the image. And so I had to replace the images that were on the page because I didn't want to hot link images. I didn't want to use anybody's copyrighted images. So the images that are on there now are free images from either NASA or from Unsplash. But aside from that, aside from those changes, this site is pretty much as it was when the AI generated it. And then the other site that I might use for testing is just the Aardvark homepage. So we'll work our way through those today. I'm going to go ahead and close out this tab with the old version of the easy checks so that I don't get confused. And we'll start working our way through this skip link test. So the first thing it's going to do is explain to us what a skip link is. And it is basically a link that is usually hidden by default, but becomes visible once it gets focused. So if I come over here to the Discover Venus site and I hit the tab key, okay, so this site does not have a skip link. Let's check the Discover Mercury site. Let's see. No skip link on this one either. All right, so Aardvark will be our savior here. Let's see. Whoops. What am I doing? Where am I? Oh, there we go. Okay. Skip to content. So you can see that I had focus over here on the nav, and then I shift tab. I hit shift tab a few times to move focus backward, back up the page. And now this link that says skip to content has focus, and we can see it. So it's not there normally. It's not visible normally, but once it receives focus, it does become visible. So that's what we're talking about when we talk about a skip link. And this will let us skip over, this heading section, which is the same on every page of the site. So once I've been through it one time, I don't need to experience it over and over again. And this will let me just skip over this nav and header area and skip right to the main content of the page. You are not limited to having just one skip link that skips you directly to the content. You can add multiple skip links to a page. So if you want to having one at the very, very top of the HTML page, so it's the very first thing that will get focused once a page loads up, that lets you skip directly to the main content, is a great idea. Highly recommend it. But you could also have others as well. So for example, if we're just looking at this WAI page that happens to be loaded up in the browser right now, we can see that they have an always visible skip link that's up here at the top of the page, which that's an option as well. I have worked on a few sites where the skip to content link is actually just visible all the time rather than just being on focus. So we have that. And we do have like a relatively robust header area that's here with navigation, with multiple layers of navigation, because we have a top bar with a few links in it. We have some navigation here along with a search, which if you're not aware, If you have a search facility on your website, that also counts as navigation. And then we have our regular main navigation, and then we have breadcrumbs. So we have quite a lot going on in the header of this page, even though it looks like a pretty simple, straightforward page. So skipped content is going to let us skip, I would assume, right down here to the first header, but let's give it a try. And it looks like that's where we are. Okay. So it looks like that skipped us right to this first header to start working through that. But I may also want a link to specifically skip this sidebar, because there's quite a lot of links going on in there. And we could just tab our way through here. Let's see. So we're on all translations. We're on the header. We're on the tagline, get involved, about, the search, and then the search button. And then accessibility fundamentals, planning. Okay, we're going across. Sorry, I'm following the keyboard with my mouse just to kind of show where it is. And then it looks like we go straight into this sidebar, and I didn't get a skip link in front of it. So not required, but a good idea to have a skip link before an area like this where people might want to be able to skip over it. So anything on the page that might be kind of tiresome or repetitive or redundant is a good candidate for having a skip link to let people who are navigating the page with a keyboard alone or with a screen reader to just skip over that section of content. And so I kind of just explained this. Why are those important? And then how do we check those? So if you weren't here last time, the interesting thing about this draft version of the Easy Checks is that they appear to have made a bookmarklet for every test. So you can see them. They're starting to stack up here on my bookmark bar. But I'm going to go ahead and bookmark this one. Check the skip link. And then, as I described last time, the one kind of downside to bookmarklets, which I'll take a step back in a second. Well, actually, let me take a step back first and explain what a bookmarklet is. So a bookmarklet is a snippet of JavaScript that will run in your browser that you can bookmark as though it were a web page. So I'm sure that you're aware that, you come across a web page, you think it's awesome and amazing, you can save that, right? Like you can bookmark that in your browser. And then you have this little library of pages that you have bookmarked, and it's really easy to return to those at any time. A bookmarklet is not an actual web page that you're bookmarking, but a little bit of functionality that will run in your browser. And there are a few sites where you can download accessibility bookmarklets that are really helpful for manual testing. This page happens to be one of them. Do be thoughtful about where you are getting your accessibility bookmarklets from, because they are JavaScript and there is a potential that they could be doing something nefarious on your site. So you want to be careful about that, that they are coming from a reputable source. So the Web Accessibility Initiative is a perfectly reputable source. I have no concerns about saving bookmarklets from their page. The one drawback that I have found personally for bookmarklets is that because they are just a small snippet of JavaScript, kind of once you have bookmarked them, it's not easy to remember or figure out where they came from. And I have several that I use on a regular basis that I have absolutely no idea where those came from at this point. I trust myself. I know that at the time I got them, that they were from a reputable source, and that I wouldn't have bookmarked them in my browser if they were dangerous. So I feel fine about using them, but now it's frustrating because when I am trying to teach other people how to do web accessibility testing, I don't know where I got these things from. So my recommendation is that you use a tag system, that you use the tags that are built into the bookmarking, and or the name when you save a bookmarklet. so that you remember where it came from. So you can see I've made this tag for WCAG Easy Checks so that when I come back to this set of bookmarks later, I will remember that that is where they all came from. So you could use the tags. You could also add it to the name, just a little note to yourself about where this bookmarklet came from. And I recommend doing that, taking the extra couple of seconds at the time that you're saving a bookmarklet to do that so that you don't end up in my situation. All right, so we have our bookmarklet saved. And you can see what the check will look like on an accessible page by clicking the button below. So they have this that will just highlight. You can see what it did. It added this yellow highlight here that tells me that this is a skip link and where it's going. And then it highlights this area here to tell me that this is where the skip link is taking me. So let's go over to our Discover Venus site where we have already figured out that there's no bookmarklet here. I'm sorry, there's no skip link here. And let's try this bookmarklet. Let's see what happens. Okay, so this is interesting. So this site is a single page, is just a single page, right? There's not actually a whole website here. There's just a single page. And our main navigation at the top of the page doesn't actually link off to other pages as you might expect. It just links to sections of this page. So this bookmarklet has, I think, correctly identified that this about link is a skip link that will take me down to the about area. And then we can see that our skip link connects here, is highlighted in the about area. All right, so checking skip links. All right, okay, well, that just takes me back to the article. Okay, I was just curious about what would happen if I clicked that. Okay, and then we can exit out of that. It does look like, let me exit out of this. It does look like it may only find a single skip link. I'm just looking for, yeah, I think it's just looking for a single link. So this won't necessarily help you if you're dealing with a page that has multiple skip links. It looks like this one is just going to find the very first skip link that's on the page, because the reason I say that is because this destinations link and this contact link and even this book now button all take you to, I'll skip you down to other parts of the content on this page. So there are, like, from a programmatic point of view, there's multiple skip links on this page, and it only highlighted the first one. All right, and then if we try it on a site that we know has it, let's go ahead, just refresh this, and we'll check the skip link. All right, and it did find that skip to contact support is actually our first skip link that's on the page, which is actually correct. Skip to contact support is the first one. And it does skip you down to our help down here in the corner, and that's technically nested in an iframe, and I think the bookmarklet wasn't able to figure that all out to highlight this element here, but that's okay. It's a little bit of an unusual situation. So we have the skip to support first, and then we have our skip to content on the Aardvark homepage, or on any page of the Aardvark website. All right, so that is how we will test for the skip link, and it will tell us how you can check other pages as you save this bookmarklet. And then it does tell me what to look for, right? And it tells me sometimes it's not the first link on a page. The tool provided here only checks for the first link that skips down the current page. It is possible that this link is not the one that skips to the main content. This means that there's a problem with the skip link. The wording of the link doesn't matter as long as the purpose is clear. Common wording includes skip navigation, skip to content, skip to main content, etc. All right, so it sounds like they actually want me to swap my links around so that skip to main content is the first one, and then skip to support would be the second one, which that's not a problem. We can do that on our site and make that a little more expected behavior. All right, so skip link test is pretty simple. It's just going to check our very first link on the page, and make sure that that is our link to skip over the navigation or skip to the main content. All right, let's go ahead and move to the next test, which is our visible keyboard focus. All right, so what is it? So you may have seen as I was kind of tabbing around through the page that there should be some kind of visible change on an element when it receives focus. Hi, Maria. Sure, yes, you can ask questions. I can see your comments here, so I can answer those as we go along. So if I'm just going to click my mouse up here in the corner and start tabbing so that we can kind of see what happens. So I can see that the focus is here right now because this text turned yellow and it got a big thick yellow border around it. And if I hit tab again, I can see that focus has moved over here to get involved because it got an underline and it got a white border around it. So there's a really visible indication of where focus is on the page. So that's what we mean when we say keyboard focus. I can tell where focus happens to be on the page. And why is that important? It is important for people who are navigating through a website with a keyboard alone. And this is a large group of people. There are lots of people who either can't use a mouse or can't use a mouse very well or prefer not to. So a lot of just very experienced developers, for example, tend to do a lot of keyboard navigation, even if they don't have any kind of disability. We have people who don't have hands or arms. We have people who can't move their hands or arms. We have people who maybe can move their hands or arms, but in a limited kind of way, or they don't have fine motor control. So there are lots of different ways that people get around by using the keyboard alone, and they should not have to use a mouse to get around your site. So what we're going to check for here is keyboard focus, because as you can imagine, as you're tabbing through the page, it's really important that you be able to see where the focus is, because how else will you know what you're going to activate or which form field you're going to fill in if you can't tell what happens to have focus right now? So that's really important. I'm curious about this bookmarklet, if I'm being honest, because it's pretty easy to test keyboard focus without help. So I'm curious about what this bookmarklet is going to do. So let's go ahead and check keyboard focus on this page and see what happens. Okay. Wow. Okay. So what it did is it just triggered the focus style on every single thing on the page that can receive focus. So it's a little bit of sensory overload, but I guess it is a shortcut to check everything on the page all at once and make sure that it all has a focus style. Now, where this could get a little bit challenging is that it does require us to remember what these things look like before. So for a lot of these things, it's pretty easy because I know that this didn't have a big yellow border around it before, for example, and I know that these didn't have this big white border around them. So we do have to do a little bit of remembering what something looked like before, but we can go down through and I can see now this button has this border around it, which it didn't have before. This link has a nice border around it. So we can see everything on the page that can be activated in some way, whether it's a button or a link or a form field, has some kind of style indicator on it now. Okay, so I guess that the bookmarklet is a handy, like, let's check everything all at the same time and make sure it gets some kind of style on it. Let's jump over to the Discover Venus page, and I'm just going to start tabbing from the very, very top. Okay, so here's our first link on the page is our logo for Discover Venus. And sometimes things get a little funky with images, but I do see a dotted border there that's happening. It's not terribly prominent, so I would say that maybe we would want to make this a little bit more obvious to make it a little bit more helpful, but there is something there at least. And if I tap again, my about link, it's a nice bright blue outline, so I can tell where it is. Now I'm on destinations, contact, and book now. So that book now was pretty subtle. So if I hit Shift Tab to go back off of it again and tab back to it, just so you can keep your eye on it, I'll do that once more. It does very subtly change color. You do not want your focus style change to be color alone. And especially if it's going to be color, it can't be that subtle. So that was a very subtle color change that was on there. Now, we are getting, like if I shift tab back to the contact link there in the navigation, we are getting, there's this bright blue outline that's happening around the contact link. And when I tab, I do have that same bright blue link or border rather around that book now button. But because that button is blue already, that border isn't super obvious. So I think it would be ideal if there was, like, number one possibility would be some separation between the outline and the button. And let me just mess around with the CSS here a little bit to kind of show you what I mean. All right, let's inspect this button. And we have on focus. Let's do an outline offset of maybe like 2 pixels. Let's take a look at what that looks like. Yeah, so now there's some separation between that blue outline and the button that helps to make it a little bit more obvious. And I could probably make that even a little bit bigger of a gap. Let's try 4 pixels. Let's see what that looks like. Yeah, so you can see that now, like, even though it's still that blue color, because now it's separated from the rest of the button, it's easier to see. Another option would be to change the color of that outline, and that is all stylable in CSS. So you can adjust the styles on your website to make sure that that's visible. Okay, let me go ahead and close out of here, and we'll keep tabbing down the page. Okay, so we got to the See More link, and we see that that completely changed color and got an outline, so that's great. Scroll down, got a color change and a visible outline. Our destination form field here, I guess, changed background color and it got a border. So that's a pretty obvious change, and I suspect the rest of the form fields will be the same. And then my button has the same problem as that button in the header. So what I would want to do there is take that outline, maybe change its color to something that would contrast more with the blue, and or add that outline offset to bump it out just a little bit from that button. So there was some separation there. So that is generally ensuring that we have a visible focus. So you just want to tab all down your page and take a look and make sure that you can see where focus is. So this page actually looks like it's in pretty good shape. Let's give this Discover Mercury site a try and see what happens. Okay, so the first link on the page is actually home. That's at the very beginning of the navigation. And I can tab through the rest of the navigation to the Book Now link. Book your voyage, learn more. Book now, view all packages. And now where's my focus? So I can't actually tell. I don't see anything on the screen that obviously has focus. So the only way for me to figure out what that might be would be to try to activate whatever it is. But it could be a link that I don't want to go to, or could be a section of content on the page that I don't necessarily want to interact with. So let me hit the enter key and we'll see what happens. Okay, so I see that it toggled the first accordion there, but you can see that there is no indication at all that focus is on that first accordion. So now I'm guessing it's on the second. I hit tab again. I'm guessing it's on the third. I'm guessing it's on the fourth, fifth. Okay, And now we're at the very bottom where we have the view all FAQs. So we could not tell at all, right? So if I shift tab back up through that list, you can't even tell that those items have focus. So that would definitely be a failure of this test. And that's the kind of thing that we're looking for when we're doing this test for visible keyboard focus. We want to make sure that every single element on the page that can receive focus, that we can tell when it has focus, and that the style change that happens cannot be just a color change. It can include a color change, but it has to have another style change. A border or an outline, rather, is a really nice way to do that. It's very visible. You can customize it. You can change what color it is. You can change the thickness. You can change the style to make sure that whatever design is going on your page, that outline is going to be visible and easy to see. Okay, let's go down through this page here, and it tells us like what to look for, that all of our interactive elements have an obvious visual style that tells us. And we also want to make sure that we don't get any blank things, like we don't tab and we just suddenly see a little outline somewhere on the page and there's nothing obvious that's there. That would definitely be an indication that maybe we have a link or a button that is lacking a style, or it's lacking any kind of text inside of it. And that would be a problem. So we would want to flag that and get that fixed. All right, let's move along and go to this language test. All right, so first we're going to talk about how is language identified. So if you don't know, in the code of HTML, you can put a attribute in the top of the document that tells a browser what language that page is in. And assistive technology relies on that language to determine its pronunciation of words and the dictionary that it's going to use to read aloud. If it is wrong, so if you have a page that is in Spanish, but the HTML says it's an English page, it's going to try to read that with English pronunciation, and the results are not going to be good. It's not going to be very well understood by somebody who's trying to listen to that, because the accent, the pronunciations are all going to be completely wrong. Okay, so that is our language identification and why identifying it is important. So here's our bookmarklet for, we're going to check the language on this page. And this tells me this page is English, which is correct. This is the English version of the page. The only other way to kind of check and see what the language of a page is does require going into the browser tools, which I did here just a second ago. And you can see right here, actually, let me zoom that in just a tiny bit to make it a little more obvious. All right, so you can see right here, our HTML tag has a lang attribute that says EN. So that is telling the browser, it's telling assistive technology, it's also communicating to, scrapers and crawlers and SEO bots and all of those kinds of things. This page is in English. And so when a screen reader comes and starts reading this page, it's going to assume that it's in English, and it's going to read and pronounce everything as though it were English. So let me go back. I don't think I remember to bookmark this. So let me go ahead and bookmark this link, and I'll put my tag on there so I remember where this came from. Okay, check language. So let's check language on Discover Venus. And it tells me, yeah, this is English. So that's great. Let's check Discover Mercury. It also tells me this is English. And let's check our artwork homepage. Even more specific. It is American English. So you can get more specific with the languages. So you could just say it's English, it's French, it's Spanish, or you can say, it's Argentinian Spanish, or it's Mexican Spanish, or like here, it's American English, or it's British English, or it's Australian English, etc. So here we have, it is American English. So that is great. This issue, I would say, this issue comes up less often than it used to, just because so many websites these days are built using some kind of content management system, and content management systems have built in this language into their platforms. It's pretty rare to come across like a website these days where somebody, just sat down and started coding HTML. And it's really easy to forget to add that language attribute when you do that. But it's always a good check just to make sure. So you do have another situation that can come up where maybe you have a page that is mostly in English, but maybe there's a quote or a poem or song lyrics or something else that's in the middle of the page that's in another language. And so you want to make sure that you're covering that case as well. And for that case, that lang attribute that I showed you on the HTML, you can make sure that the container that holds the little bit of content that is in another language, that it has a lang attribute that tells the page, hey, yeah, most of the page is in English, but this little section here is actually in Spanish. And then that way, assistive technology will understand that that bit of content is Spanish and will read it with the Spanish pronunciation. And use the Spanish dictionary and library when it's reading through that content. So we are definitely looking for the primary language is identified correctly. So this test was specifically looking for language of the page, but you can see that the next WCAG success criteria is language of parts, which is what I was just talking about, where part of a page is in a different language. The Discover Venus site is kind of interesting because we have so many. Let me go down to where we have the areas of Venus. Yeah, I guess here we have so many areas of the planet. So if you didn't know, this is actually kind of a cool thing about the planet Venus, is that, the planet Venus itself is named after a goddess. And then all of the like topographical features of Venus are also named after goddesses. So it's kind of fun. But we end up with these names that are in languages, from all over the world. So a Mayan goddess, an Egyptian goddess, a Babylonian goddess, a Hindu goddess, etc. And so those names aren't exactly English, but we do, like, you don't call, for example, when we're talking about this goddess, right? Like the name doesn't change from one language to another. So technically that's still the English name. So it's just a, if you would call it something different in your language, right, then you would want to make sure that you're using a lang attribute. Here, yes, these are all words that are in a lot of different languages, but because that's the word we use when we talk about it in English, we don't want to flag it as being in another language. So that's a little confusing sidebar there. And phrases that are technically in another language but are really common. So for example, a lot of Americans would know the word rendezvous, which is a French word, right? And I said it like with an American accent on it. But a lot of people understand what a rendezvous is, even though, like, I would say the American English definition of that word is not the same as the French term, and you wouldn't mark that up, right? Like words like resume, for example, you wouldn't mark that up as being in another language because it is so commonly found in English that you don't need to worry about that. All right, let's go ahead and move along to our next test, which is Zoom. All right. And Zoom, what does Zoom mean? It means that we can zoom in on pages. So I think most people realize that this is something they can do on touchscreen devices because we can pinch zoom on touchscreen devices. But you can also do this on devices that don't have touchscreens. You can, if a web page, the text is too small, or there's some, tiny caption under an image, or like an image that's too small that's difficult to see, you can zoom in on the page and make it bigger and easier to see. So on a Windows machine, how you would do that is you would use Control and then the plus and minus buttons. Plus to zoom in, minus to zoom out, and then Control 0 will reset it back to normal. So if you can't figure out exactly where that is, just Control 0. On a Mac, you use the Command key. So it's the same thing. So Command plus to zoom in, Command minus to zoom out, and then Command 0 to reset it back. And I'll do it here for you just a second. We'll zoom in. You can see we can make it quite large. And if I hit Command 0, it'll go right back to its normal size. So in this particular browser, when you zoom in, it will show you, it was right here on the address bar. It showed me where I was in the zoom. So if I hit that again, you can see now I'm at 110%, 120%, 133%, 150%, etc. And I can hit Command minus to go back out. And you can actually make things even smaller. You can go the other way and really zoom out on a page. And again, just Command 0, because I'm on a Mac, would bring me back to just the default size of the page. So that's what zoom is. It is important because sometimes people need reading glasses, people forgot their glasses, they don't have their contacts in, or they have low vision, right? And they can't see the page. So they need to be able to zoom in to make the text and the images and everything else larger so that it can be perceived. All right, so it looks like maybe for this one, we don't have a bookmarklet, but it's very easy to test in any browser. So on a touchscreen device, obviously, you can just pinch zoom to zoom in. And you want to make sure that you can do that because a website can actually disable pinch zoom. And it is more common than it should be. So I definitely would recommend if you are testing a site for accessibility that you do open it on a touchscreen device and try to pinch zoom because it's over 10%, I think, in my experience of sites actually have that disabled. And you don't want to do that. You don't want to prevent people from being able to zoom in if they need to be able to. Okay, so generally what we want to do when we're testing at AA level of WCAG is zoom the page into 200% and then take a look at the page and make sure. Here's what we're looking for right here. That all the text is readable, that text doesn't get hidden behind things, that we don't have overlapping content, that we don't have anything causing horizontal scrolling. There's a couple of little exceptions to that where content really couldn't be resized, but for the most part, you don't want to see horizontal scrolling. And you want to make sure that navigation still works. So let's go over to this Discover Venus site. I'm going to scroll back up to the top and I'm going to zoom into 200. So 110, 120, 133, 150, 170, 200. All right, so here we are at 200% zoom on the Discover Venus site. And of course, you would want to check this at a variety of different screen widths as well. And I'm gonna do a quick scroll down the page and just look for anything that's cut off or overlapping or maybe not obvious. Some kind of problems. We can see this form that was previously on a single line has wrapped to multiple lines, but that's fine. We can still use it, no problem. And this section previously had an image beside the text, and now the image is above the text. But again, that's a perfectly fine adaptation. It doesn't prevent me from seeing the image or reading the text. And I'll just keep going down the page. This was previously 3 or 4 columns, and now it's 2. That's, again, perfectly fine. Our packages were previously kind of completely horizontal, and now they're stacked a little bit. So I still have the 3 individual packages are still horizontal going across because there's room for them. But, you know, previously this was to the right and this was to the left, but now they're stacked. But that doesn't stop us from being able to use the page, so that's great. I'll go down through past all the packages. All right, this section still looks fine. I don't see anything overlapping. I don't see anything, this image, this colorful kind of purple sky image is a background image here. So part of it is getting cut off, but it's a background image anyway. It's not conveying any kind of information. There's no reason that I need to be able to see 100% of that image. My email subscription form looks fine. The credits at the bottom of the page, that all looks fine. So there's no immediate problem with scrolling into 200%. And what I would want to do next is go ahead and tab through the page and just make sure that everything still works. So you can see that the navigation is no longer visible. So let me go ahead and activate that and make sure that I can still get to this navigation. So that seems fine. And I can close the navigation. Okay, so I should ideally be able to hit the escape key on my keyboard to close this navigation. That doesn't work, but I do have this close button. So I would definitely recommend adding escape key support for that navigation. Let me go ahead and keep tabbing down the page, make sure everything seems fine. I think this page had all visible focus. Okay, yeah, those buttons, I have a blue outline on a blue button that could use some help, but we already noted that. So there's no focus style really on this form here, this form field. It looks pretty much the same. If I click my mouse here, there is a background color change, but as I mentioned, background color, just a color change alone is not sufficient for a focus style. So we would want to add something else to this form field when it received focus besides that color change. And then it looks like all of my footer links are just going to get outlines. I won't make you go through all of those. There's so many. And we'll skip down here to this footer. And we'll just, that could use a little work. Those social media links for sure. All right. So that is our page zoomed into 200%. It looks like this one survived just fine with no problems. So we would be looking for any, like I said, overlapping text that's going off the screen, stuff that requires us to scroll horizontally, etc. So this page seems to have passed that with no problem. All right, let's take a look at our next thing, which is captions. So this is only going to apply in the event that we have video or audio on our page. For people who cannot hear the audio from a video or people who cannot hear an audio file at all, we want to provide an alternate way to access that content. And one of the options that we have are captions. You may see them called subtitles, right? And then we also have options when we have captions. So we have closed captions and we have open captions. And I'll just briefly explain the difference between those. So open captions are captions that are edited directly into the video. So at the time that somebody is editing the video, they are putting that text into the video. I have seen this become a big trend on social media videos, right? Like TikTok videos and YouTube shorts and things like that, Instagram stories and things like that, where the text that the person is saying appears on the screen, even if you don't have captions turned on in that app, right? So that's open captions where they get edited directly into the video. They're a part of the video. And then we also have closed captions, which can be toggled on or off. The user could turn them on or they can turn them off, whichever they prefer. And the advantage of closed captions over open captions are that users typically get a nice amount of control over those closed captions. So if they prefer them to be light text on a dark background, if they prefer them to be at the top of the screen instead of the bottom of the screen, if they prefer the font to be larger or smaller, right? The nice thing about closed captions is users have the option to switch those around. If you have edited those captions directly into the video, they don't have those options anymore. So closed captions are generally more preferred over open captions, but open captions are better than nothing. So that's what captions are. Why they're important is obviously not everybody can hear audio. And sometimes that is because people have a disability. Sometimes it is because they are in a library and they can't be playing video out loud, or they're in a noisy room, or they're in another environment where it wouldn't be appropriate or acceptable to be playing audio out loud. You know, they're on the bus or whatever. So captions are important because people can still access that content and understand what it's all about. So here, what we would want to do is if we have video or audio, I would say content on the page, we would want to check to make sure that some kind of captions are available. So it looks like for this quick check, we're not really distinguishing between open or closed captions. We're just checking, are there captions available? And then the other thing that you also want to always check when you are checking captions is, are they accurate? Or do they have misspellings or incorrect words or skipped words, or sometimes whole sentences will get skipped? Do they actually convey the information that is being conveyed in the video or the audio file? So it's not enough that they're just there. They also have to be accurate. So here it's telling us we're going to check if they're available, and then we're going to check the quality, right? They should have correct punctuation and capitalization. They should be in sync with the spoken content, right? That always drives me crazy. I use captions all the time because I am hard of hearing, and that drives me crazy when they're completely out of sync with the video. It makes it very difficult to keep up with what's happening on the video. So you would want to make sure. Oh, and then the other thing, yes, I did forget to say this. So good thing I have this page in front of me. If there are important sounds like laughing, sighing, crying, thunder, ominous music playing, right? You want to make sure that that is also included in the captions, because of course, if somebody can't hear the dialogue that's happening in a video, they can't hear all of those sounds either. And so if there's important sounds happening that are conveying information, right? Music is telling me suddenly, there's happy music playing and suddenly that music turns sinister. You would want to note that make sure that that is noted in the captions, so that somebody who cannot hear that change in the mood of the music can pick up on the change of mood that has happened in the video. All right, so none of these sites, I don't think, have video. Oh, the Aardvark homepage might. So I don't think it does. Let me just quickly scroll down here. Yeah, no video on the homepage there. So no checks for us to do here, but that is a check you'd want to do on a page that had any kind of video. All right, our next thing is transcripts. And transcripts you want to provide generally for audio files. So if you are sharing an audio file of a podcast or a talk or anything else, you would want to make sure that you have some kind of transcript available. So if somebody they can't play the audio file, they can't hear the audio file, they have a way that they can access that same content. So that's what a transcript is it's basically, like a script that's going to say everything that is said in the video, right? And you can read it just like you would read an article. You can go through and read and get all of the same information that was happening. So here we have an example of like a transcript of a podcast. And you can see that it's not just telling me what's being said, but it's telling me who's saying it. So that's a really important part of a transcript, is that we want to make sure that it's clear who's talking at any given time. And just like with captions, if there are any important noises that are happening, people laughing, people chuckling, people sighing, music that might come in at different times, thunder or police sirens or anything like that might be happening, you would want to make sure that that also gets noted in the transcript. Because you don't want people who are reading the transcript instead of listening to the audio to miss out on those cues and that information. Okay, so there's our example. And then here is a descriptive transcript for a video where it's not going to just give me the audio from the video, but it is going to tell me what the visual is that's going with that. And it depends on what kind of video you have, right? If it's a video like what I'm doing right now, where I'm just sitting and talking, and it's just somebody talking to you, you probably don't need a descriptive transcript. If there's other stuff happening in the video, then you probably do want a descriptive transcript to say oh, somebody was saying this while they were doing this thing, to kind of give us an idea of what's happening in the video. So again, those are important for people who can't hear the video for whatever reason that happens to be. And just like with captions, we want to check to make sure not only are they there, not only are they available, but they are correct and complete, that the speech is accurate, that all of the speakers are identified, that if we have any important sounds, that that's included, and that if that kind of cohesion between audio and video is important, that we have a descriptive transcript that will tell me like what was happening visually while that audio was happening. All right, so I don't have any audio or video on any of my test sites, so we'll go ahead and skip to the next test now, which is another video one, which is audio description. So captions and transcripts are very focused on people who cannot hear audio, whether that is just a straight up audio file, or if it's a video. However, what we often forget about is people who can't see the video. And we do have assistive technology for that, which is audio description, which is a description of what's happening visually on the screen that can be added in to the regular soundtrack, so that we're not missing out on any information that's conveyed visually. So if you didn't know this, you can actually, like on your regular TV, you can actually enable audio description and get an idea. If you have a DVD of a movie, it probably has it on it. If you're streaming a movie, I think it probably also has the audio description. And if you go to a movie theater, you can actually request a device that will give you audio description of what's happening on the screen during the movie, because not everything can be picked up by just the audio of the movie alone. Right? Like sometimes there's something exciting happening on the screen, but there's not audio that really describes what's happening. So audio descriptions are important. We would want to make sure that they are there, that they exist. If the video has like visual information, so I would say, if it's a video recording of just a podcast that's just two people sitting in a podcast studio talking to one another, audio description might not be strictly required, because maybe there's not any real information that's being conveyed visually. But if it's, a TV show or a movie where things are happening and people are, running around and doing different activities, or somebody's giving a talk and they're showing slides that include information that they're not, most people aren't reading their slides word for word in a presentation. So you would want to add audio description to that to make sure that any of that information that's getting conveyed visually is included in that audio description track. All right, let's go ahead and take a look at the next one. And I think this will be our last test for today. And we almost got to the end. I'll just finish it up today. So if you can stay a couple minutes over, we'll stay a couple minutes over. All right, so first is to make sure that we have labels for form fields. And labels have to be always visible. So I know there is a huge trend toward just making placeholders on forms and not using actual separate labels. That is a bad trend, and we need to stop doing it. And we need to use always visible form field labels. So this is what they look like. There's a little picture here, right? This tells me that this field is for username. This field is for password. I can see that those are nearby those form fields. So I understand that this is this is associated with this label. They also need to be programmatically associated with those labels, so that when somebody is using assistive technology, they can tell what the label is that's associated with a form field. There is a really fast and easy way to tell if a form field is associated with its label, and that is if you click on the label, the form field should get focus. So you can see I clicked on destination and this form field got focus. So that is a fast, easy shortcut to see, is this label actually programmatically associated with this form field? So I'll try this one now. Yes, it is. And yes, it is. Okay. And then I think there's one more down here. So we have email address, and I can see that my cursor shows up in there when I fill that in. Let's take a look over here at the Discover Mercury site. Do we have, there's a form at the bottom, I think. So here we have a form. If I click on your name, okay, it did it correctly. So the AI did something right. So, okay, email address, interest, message. Okay, now that can't be the end of the checks because there's some other things that can go wrong, but that is a quick and easy check to make sure that a label is programmatically associated with a form field. So these are important for a few reasons. Number one, if we're listening to the form because we're using a screen reader, we don't want to hear text field. What do I type in there? I can't tell, right? I want to make sure that it says text field, username, right? So that I can understand, oh, I need to enter my username in this field. Otherwise, we're just, somebody who is using assistive technology just has to guess what these different form fields are. They don't, because it doesn't get announced. The label doesn't get announced for the form field. All right, so we can see what the check will look like on an accessible page. So if we check that, it's telling us here is the label for an ID with name. And here is my form, and it has this little label that tells me labeled with a checkbox. I have a role, which has a field next to it, and I can see that this form field says it's missing its label. So this role is like, if I turn this back off, right, this name field and the role field, they look identical. So you might think, oh, everything's fine. And if I click on name, you can see it highlights that field. But if I click on role, nothing happens. So this is not an actual label that is programmatically associated with this form field, even though it looks identical. So that is definitely something to keep an eye out for. And then down here, we can see that we've got a few different situations. So our first checkbox is actually missing its label. The second one is a label, and the third one is a label. So let's take a look and see what's going on here. So just like with these kind of fields, if you click on the label, then the form field gets focused. For radio buttons and checkboxes, it's really nice because you should be able to check on the label itself to check the checkbox, which is so nice because sometimes those checkboxes and radio buttons are so teeny tiny, and you can check, you get this whole area that you can click on instead of just trying to hit this little teeny tiny checkbox, which can be really tricky if you're trying to use your fingers on a touchscreen device. It can also be really tricky if you have issues with fine motor control, right? It can be very difficult to hit those. So here I can click on that. And there's a variety of different ways that labels can be programmatically associated with their form fields, but we would want to make sure. So the Discover Mercury site, and then we do have, so here we have another failure. So you can see that when I click on this label, subscribe to newsletter, it doesn't highlight this form field. So it looks like this form field has a label, but it's not correctly programmatically associated. So that's something that we would want to check and make sure. And then also what you'll see a lot of times is like this subscribe to newsletter wouldn't even be here, right? And it would just say like subscribe to email in the box. That's what's called a placeholder. And that is not a sufficient label for a form field. You cannot do that because, of course, as soon as I type one character in that field, that placeholder disappears, which can make it really difficult to fill out a form. I personally had an experience a few months ago where I was filling out a form. It had maybe 8 fields and it was using placeholders only. I got interrupted in the middle of filling out the form. Someone came to my front door. I had to go answer the door. I was gone for 20 minutes or so. I came back and I had to delete all of my entries that I had filled in the form so far because I couldn't tell what I was answering. I couldn't see the questions anymore because the placeholders had disappeared. And, if I had been able to do it in just one sitting, I probably could have remembered what they all were. But even with 8 fields, that's not a reasonable thing to expect people to remember, that if I want to check over that form before I submit it, I have to try to remember what each field was asking to make sure that my answer is correct. It's too much cognitive load, and it's going to be a problem for a lot of people. And it's especially going to be a problem for people with, short-term memory problems, who have traumatic brain injuries, and people who are just busy and get interrupted, which, like, who is not busy? Like, who doesn't get interrupted in the middle of doing tasks? Like, that's literally everybody. So you want to make sure that all of your form fields have labels. Okay, let's go ahead and take a look at this last test for required fields. So a required field is a field that's in a form that we want to make sure that we fill it in before we submit the form. It's information that is required by the company, by the person, whoever is making this field. They don't want your form submission unless you have filled this in, right? Now, traditionally, we have marked those with an asterisk, which is okay, but it is really difficult to see. Not everybody understands what the asterisk is for, and it doesn't really get read out to assistive technology. So we want to do something else for marking our required fields. So one is, we actually want to say that they are required. So we actually want to put the word required there. We also want to mark them as required in the code, so they are programmatically marked as required. So let's go ahead and give this one a try here. So checking for required fields. Let's go ahead and click it. So it's going to tell me first name and last name are both required fields. And if I undo this, you can see that last name does have an asterisk on it. So if somebody understands what the asterisk means, they'll understand last name is a required field. First name, it doesn't have any kind of indicator, but it must have a programmatic indicator that's telling me that it's a required field. All right, so here's what we want to look for. We want to make sure that there is some kind of visible indicator to tell me that a field is required. We want to make sure that that there's some kind of messaging to the user that form fields are required. We don't want to make them guess, right? And I will tell you right now, straight up, there are so many crazy, weird forms on the internet that I will often just go to a form that I have to fill out and click the submit button just to see which fields get highlighted as required. So my own little shortcut of figuring out what the required fields are when it's not immediately obvious is to just try to submit the form and see what happens. I shouldn't have to do that, right? It should be obvious. There should be some kind of messaging on the form that tells me, hey, required fields are marked with the word required, or they're marked with this, or they're marked with that. So some kind of visual indication that they are marked. And then also a programmatic. You want to mark those programmatically, so there is a required attribute that you can add to those form fields in the HTML that marks them as required for the form to be submitted. And then you want to be, we could take this a little bit further, and maybe I could pick this up next time and we could talk about forms in more depth next time. But when I show an error message for a form field, I want it to be helpful. I want it to actually instruct me on what I need to do to correct my submission, right? And not just say, there was an error. Because what field was there an error with, and what was the problem? How do I fix it? How do I know what the problem was? So to go a little beyond just marking required fields, but to also think about, like, if somebody does try to submit the form without filling in that field, what error message are you going to show to them? So maybe that's what we could take a look at next time, is some correct and incorrect ways of marking up forms, because they do get pretty complicated and there's more to think about with forms than you might expect. All right, so we made it all the way through the WCAG easy checks. So in the draft update, so that's pretty nice. Thank you so much for joining me today. I think we'll tackle forms next time. So 2 weeks from today, if you want to join me again, we'll talk in depth about forms and all the things that can go wrong with them. But I hope you have a beautiful, wonderful day. And thank you so much for joining me.